I'm Doug Thompson. Welcome to this edition of Legislative Updates with John Barker of the Kansas House of Representatives for the 70th District. Most of us get our information concerning the actions of the Kansas legislature either from some form of media or after the fact, as the legislation either became law or died during the process. Representative John Barker has graciously agreed to take time from his schedule to update pending legislation as the bills are moving through committee to consideration by the House of Representatives. Right after this short break, let's talk with Representative John Barker concerning this week in the Kansas legislature. Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, John Barker. And John was kind enough to bring Ron Highland in from the 51st District. And the legislature is, I don't know if the right term is done for the term's over.
We have hit sine die, which means it was the last day. The governor, of course, has been signing bills. After he receives them, he has 10 days. So he's been signing bills. I think he signed the last bill that he's eligible to sign. And we're all sitting back and kind of getting back into our lifestyle that we had prior to the legislature, Doug. And I'm glad Ron can come today. We're going to talk about agriculture, and which is important in the state of Kansas. It's like 45% of the state economy, and of course in Dickinson County it's probably more than 45% of the county economy. So we're going to do that. But you know, we've just been busy doing other things, and I'll get back to having court. Thanks for covering me for
No,
those
you're
months.
welcome. You're welcome.
But you know, we've got a few things going on. There's a possibility, you know, we've had the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court concerning school finance. They probably will render a decision hopefully the last of June, 1st of July. By the questions that were asked, it doesn't appear that the case will go away, but they may give the legislature another year to address their concerns. Hopefully that's not the case. I'm hoping that they will buy into our solution. It's $1.2 billion over 5 years. You know, it's a lot of money, folks. And if they do, that case can go away, but again, it can come back. It's been going on for about 30 years.
Yeah, I remember.
So hopefully we can get that done. A couple of things in the district. Last week we had a legislative update in Abilene. There were a number of people that showed up. There could have been more. It was sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. The next Saturday, not this Saturday, this is the 23rd, I believe, right? Tomorrow's the 23rd.
Today's the 25th.
25th, I'm sorry. Next Saturday, there is a dedication in Solomon, a World War I memorial, that the Lieutenant Governor will be there to speak. It's in the morning. It'll be in the paper. I would like for as many veterans, of course, within the county to attend that. I will be there. And other than that, Doug, and I wrote a letter to the Speaker this week. As you know, the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, has rendered a decision that says sportsbook gaming can be in any state. Prior to that, it was only in the state of Nevada and Las Vegas. So a number of states are addressing that issue to allow casinos to have a sports book, which is the betting on baseball, basketball, football. I've asked the Speaker to, we had 4 bills introduced last year. I've asked the Speaker to allow 3 days where we could have an interim committee with the Senate, Fed, and State. Of course, Ron will be on as my Vice Chair, will be on it with me. And we're going to look at if it's possible to do that in the state of Kansas. And if it is, we'll have to, of course, find the Kansas solution to that. So hopefully, you know, this summer I've got post-audit, a couple of meetings of post-audit this summer. You know, summer is, to be a part-time job, I spend most of my time doing this.
I bet you do.
And I know Ron does too. He's got more speaking engagements around. How many have you got scheduled?
Well, Monday, and then the Healing Wall is coming to Wamego, and
Right.
they've asked me to speak at that. And but with 5 counties, I stay pretty busy.
Right?
Okay.
And this is an election year.
On top of it.
On top of it.
Well, you know, I don't see an off season in here for you because I know you have cattle and farming and ranching and other things, and plus you're still a judge.
Right.
And so you're doing all of those jurisdictions, and I can tell from what's going on that there are lots of papers that come to you every day.
Every day.
Every day. And matter of fact, you were working on something with a survey. You were We were talking, you had a survey, and
I did. I sent out a legislative update to all the constituents in Dickinson County and Marion County, the 70th district. I'm so happy that the responses I've received over 100 back, and I'm not sure, every day I keep getting more. And eventually, I'm doing a spreadsheet to results of those 4 or 5 questions that were asked, and I will either put them on my Facebook or I will get them out to the public so that they understand where the district is. Most of those questions had to do with education and funding of education, and I think the results will be very interesting to the public.
okay, and it's something you send out just really to get some help from the voters and those who live in the district.
Exactly. I want to know, where the district's at. Tell me, and I encourage people to always call me or stop me on the street, ask me where, or tell me where they think we should be, because I'm the representative of the people, so I need to know what the people think.
Sure. And we'll put up on the screen your contact information, John, and Ron, for you also, we'll put it up. Right now, we've got to cut away, take a quick break. We'll be back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, as always, my special guest, John Barker. And in this session today, we have Ron Highland coming in, and Ron's with the 51st District out of Pottawatomie County. Is that pretty close, Ron? Did I get it?
Actually, I live in Wabaunsee County, but I represent Pot, Wabaunsee, Riley, Shawnee, and Lyon.
He has more counties. 5 counties or 6?
5 counties.
Yeah, 5
counties.
counties. That's
Well,
awesome. Well, thank you for being here. And I know, Ron, you had sent me a report before we started today on the agricultural economy in Kansas. I've read that article, and it's fantastic, just like the one you sent before that talked about the debt in Kansas and the number of people working in government across each county. It was an excellent report. It had a lot of interest in it, and I've sent that out to a number of people that wanted to study it further. So tell me about the agriculture in Kansas.
Okay, well, I'm on the Ag Committee, and on all the committees, it's people from all over the state that are on those, assigned to the committees. Well, most of the committee are from urban areas. They really don't understand agriculture. So I asked from the chair, and he gave me permission, and I brought in the head of the Ag Economics Department at Kansas State to come in and give us an update. And what you're going to see is mostly of what his report was. And John mentioned earlier that the agriculture in Kansas represents about 45% of our economy. Well, and that trickles down. They're consumers as well. One example, the automobile sales, people don't know this, but automobile sales accounts for 20% of all of our retail sales tax. And when they're not buying, when the 45% of your economy isn't buying, that affects the entire revenue stream for the state. Now, Dr. Featherstone, he provided for us 3 diagrams. And the first one is remarkable in that in 2015, the agriculture economy in Kansas tanked. And before that, the average net income for a farm in Kansas was about $100,000. Well, after this, and when it tanked, the average was $4,000
A year?
a year.
Went from 100,000 to 4,000.
That's how far it dropped.
We're going to put that. We'll put that net farm income information up on the screen for you.
And then he shared with us, and the K-State has agreements with several farms all over the state, and that's where they gather all this information. They help them manage their farm programs. And what startled me the most was they looked at what it cost to raise these 3 different crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat. And the revenue, and then you look at the total cost for the corn, and they lose money.
Yeah.
Soybeans were the only ones where they made any money. It was $420 revenue and total cost $352 an acre. So they made money on soybeans.
Yeah.
Wheat, again, lost money. And that's why the acreage for corn, or for wheat in our state, is going down precipitously. I mean, everybody is either going to soybeans or corn to rotation, and wheat is being left out now because of that. And you look at that next diagram, the distribution of the net farm income. Negative income in 2015, almost 43% of the farms lost money. 67% 70% of those, 68% of them, their total income was less than $50,000. Now that trend is coming up somewhat, but then we have to start relating what's going on in the world economy and how that's affecting our state.
Right.
And if you look at the global impact of what's going on, and that next diagram you see between 1985 and 2016, the differences in the amount of our global exports. 85 on soybeans was, we had 77% of the market. Now we have 38%.
Why?
Corn.
Why, Ron?
Well, what's happening is, and if you look at the global, what's going on, and later I'll show you the 3 articles that cover this really well. But Brazil, and I didn't know this, but they have a huge prairie in Brazil, and they are plowing that under and turning that into farm ground. So they are undercutting the market, Brazil and Russia primarily, but then you threw in Argentina and Australia and all the other countries, and we're competing with the rest of the world.
And their labor costs would be less too.
Labor, you name it, everything's less.
Chemicals.
But labor primarily. And so our worldwide competition has affected us in Kansas dramatically. And then the latest news, this embargo and tariff arguments we've gotten into with the rest of the world, specifically China, which is a large buyer, they are now buying more from Brazil and Russia, whereas before they bought from us. So the soybean farmer, which looked pretty good, may this year go down, which will be an unfortunate incident following all of this global thing that's going on. We'll see what happens,
Yeah.
but the federal government is one negotiating there, and our Midwestern farmers being left out of the conversation. So it's not going to be a pretty situation.
Well, I'm guessing on some of this, if we take, for instance, having been raised on a farm, so I grew up on one, and the farmer next door to you and the farmer down the road from you, everybody has all of the same equipment. And I don't know how it is in Russia, but I recall that they were doing a lot of cooperatives. So they would have had large areas that a tractor is working, where in the States there may be a lot of farms that have a $100,000 tractor. And in Russia, they may have one $100,000 tractor that's covering a lot of territory, which brings their costs down. Is that still accurate?
That's still accurate. But what you're seeing is, because of these situations, we're seeing a downsizing of the farms in that some of them are having to sell because they can no longer afford to keep above. So you're seeing larger farmers becoming larger, and the smaller farmers, unfortunately, are going to be driven out because they just can't take the overhead.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of co-op farms, but we'll come back to that just as soon as we finish break. We're going to cut away, take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the farm economy. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. Host Doug Thompson with special guest John Barker and Ron Highland. We're talking about the farm economy in Kansas and what's going on throughout the world, and it's frightening because we're talking about it. We've already put up on the chart, up on the screen, we put up the chart about the cost of the to produce the corn, to harvest it, to sell it, and it's, there's just not enough money in there.
No, I grow wheat, and I was just looking at this. The revenue's $176 per acre, $176, and it's costing $251.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's the reason we're always looking at the production. 50, 60, 70 bales bushel an acre is very good. This year, because of our drought situation, we may have 30, and if we don't get some rain in the near future, it may be 20 or 10. And you still have that cost that I've already paid for.
Right, and the taxes go on, and
Exactly.
and the equipment maintenance and insurance and everything else. Sure,
On a bad year, the tax man still comes around.
that's right. And it could be a bad year this year because
be a
of the
bad
weather,
year.
and it's extremely dry throughout this territory. So, Ron, where do you want to go from here on it?
Well, one area that we touched on but we didn't talk about would be overproduction, because the typical American farmer now is producing so much more than they ever did in the history because of technology and methods, you name it. That overproduction is also factored into the formula about how much they're going to make. You may produce a lot more grain, but if you drive across the state, you're seeing now piles of grains sitting because there's nowhere to market that. There's nowhere to sell it. But let's go back to a positive note. The world population is increasing, and the demand will increase in the future. So at some point, all this production will catch up. The demand will again catch up with what we have to produce. So that time will come. It's just not going to happen immediately or right now. And the farmers are very resilient people. They're very good business people, and they're going to determine ways to compete. And as a legislature, we made the first step to try to help that.
Right.
We passed a bill to allow research on hemp production.
Yeah.
And hemp has so many opportunities, so many value added. After you've grown it, you can do so many different things with it that a lot of farmers came to us and asked if that would be something we could look into. We passed the bill, and so it's going to happen.
And we talked about that last week with Dan
rope and
Hawkins, rope and clothing. And,
right.
And I've got a number of farmers that have had interest in it. We've just allowed K-State to do research in that.
And to work with whatever university they find best fits. And part of that is enticing in that, let's say along the Kansas-Colorado border, we would build a factory to deal with all those products grown in western Kansas and eastern Colorado. We'd love to have it on our side of the border, obviously. So we're looking into that. And then there are also other alternative crops are being studied. The farmers are looking for other ways. And I didn't know it, but Kansas now is the 4th largest producer of cotton.
I did not know that.
Southwest Kansas, it's becoming more and more a part of the production cycle. And because they've said the wheat's not doing it for us, let's look for something else, cotton is paying off for them. So it's growing rapidly.
And hemp doesn't need a lot of moisture.
No.
Kansas would be perfect for it.
Perfect, yeah. With you don't need to irrigate or have pivots or anything.
Right.
It just, it's almost like a weed.
Yeah.
And I guess some people call it weed.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So.
Well, so you're anticipating there'll be some diversification of crops. There'll be other crops that'll be introduced in, try to get something that that they can make a profit off of, because as we went through the sheets, there were the figures on the sheet that you provided. Most of those, with the exception of soybean, are costing more to produce. Now, I'm guessing in that figure on the production, there's a depreciation on equipment, and there's other things, but it's still money out of the pocket, because you got to replace that tractor.
Right.
You might have a $100,000 tractor and you depreciate it out, you get good use out of it, but when you replace it, you still need another tractor.
Yeah, the good farmers are going to figure out how to get through this period of time. They've done it in the past, they'll do it again. From a state and a legislative standpoint, how does this affect us? And we have this group of people that give us a consensus revenue estimate, and that's how much money we're going to have in the future. Unfortunately, I looked at their data, and they're painting a fairly rosy picture on the agriculture side. So I have a feeling next year in the legislature, we're going to have a little bit of a difficult time because the revenue is not going to be there for good reasons. And then you add to that the property taxes, which we did not talk about. They've gone up dramatically, especially for farmers, and I didn't include the chart.
But property taxes are not a state issue. We
No.
do the 20 mil statewide. All the other property taxes is added on by counties, cities, school districts. Those are the big, the state mostly controls the income taxes.
Right.
And sales taxes, although cities have some authority in counties to put a sales tax on.
Right.
But when we talk about bad taxes, it's property taxes, and that's mostly from counties and cities.
That's the local tax.
That's the local
essentially.
tax.
And that has gone up. I've gotten many calls from farm owners and landowners about how that's gone up over the last few years. That's a whole nother conversation about how that's calculated.
Like when we did debt last week or week before.
Right. And just to finish this off, there's 3 great articles that came out in the Wall Street Journal in the last year. The first one is Next American Farm Bust is Upon Us. The second one is U.S. farmers who once fed the world are overtaken by new powers. And the third one is the transformation of the American farm in 18 charts. Those 3 articles give you a beautiful overview of what's going on in the ag economy.
Okay. All right, those titles are on the screen. You'll be able to pull those up. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates with my co-host John Barker, and we have Ron Highland here today. This will be the last legislative session that we do for this season because the legislature is out of session, but they may get called back. If that happens, well, we'll have updates and we'll coordinate and see where we go from there. But John, thank you so much for taking time every Friday to come in and give us the latest information and to bring in good people like Ron and all of those people that you brought in.
You know, it's just, I want to help my constituents of the 70th District, you know, kind of know what the process and where we're at. And, you know, we've had the Speaker here, we've had the Senate Majority Leader, we've had the Chairman of Health and Human Services. Ron's been on a couple of different times. I thought his program on the county debt was just
That's
fantastic.
tremendous. Yeah.
And you can tell he spent his career in research. But no, it's been a pleasure, Doug, and thank you for having this show.
Our pleasure. We're getting the word out and appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed Legislative Updates. See you next time.